Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Grief Let's Talk About It podcast. I just want to say welcome. Thank you for tuning in. For those who are tuning in, let us know where you guys are from. And today we are talking about a very much needed topic. We're talking about suicides and addictions, the rise in it. And we're posing the question as we go: as is it a mental health issue or is it something else, man? We got a live panel for you guys today, man. We got some of the members of the Global Grief Network. We got some members, from different parts of the grief world and things like that, bringing different perspectives. And I'm going to bring these guys on and let them introduce themselves. So, while you guys are out there tuning in and everything, let us know where you're from. And if you guys, throughout any of the conversation, have any questions, go ahead and let us know, man. And we're going to get this thing started. All right. Hello, everyone.
How are you?
Well, hello.
All right.
Before we start,
You guys
take
take
a minute.
to introduce yourself.
All right, I'll go first. I'm Dominika Staniewicz. I'm a brain coach certified by Dr. Amen and Dr. Joseph McClendon III. Absolutely two amazing human beings who are, one is a neuropsychiatrist, board certified and a life changer, and another one is neuropsychologist who specialized in rewiring your brain as Dr. Amen does. And that's what I do. I base working with you on science and on rewiring your brain, working with your neural connections, and with a lot of fantastic things that shorten the time from grief to happiness, from trauma to being better. And I absolutely love what I do.
Jay.
Well, my
My
name
name
is
is
Jay
Jay
Luther,
Luther,
and
and
I'm a
I'm a
life coach.
life coach.
And
And like I talked about earlier,
I
I
specialize
specialize
in
in
using
using
grief
grief
to be
to
able
be able
to, for
to, for the person,
basically
basically
use the
use the energy of grief
to be able
to be able to show them that
they
they
can
can
actually
actually
become a
become a better version of themselves to it.
And
And
I love
I
what I
love
do.
what I do.
So,
So,
All right. You
all
still
right,
got
you
some
still got
echo,
some alcohol in there,
but that's
but
okay.
that's okay.
Anthony?
Anthony?
Yes.
Yes.
My name's
My name's
Anthony.
Anthony.
Am I
Am I
echoing?
echoing?
Yes, I think
Yes, I think everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No worries.
No worries.
I'm from New
From New
Jersey
Jersey,
and
and
don't have any
don't have any
special
special
degrees
degrees
or
or
anything like
anything
that.
like that.
I guess you could
Guess
call
you
me
could call me
a free
a
agent.
free agent.
I
I
study
study
psychology, philosophy, and I do it on a freelance basis. I'm not necessarily beholden to any institution, university, or anything like that. I love talking to people. I love helping out. I have, everyone has their own story. So I, of course, have my own. I like to bring a different angle to certain things. And I feel like I can do that, not being beholden to certain institutions, but being educated at the same time. So I am an author, podcaster, first time father of a 7-month old. Yeah, that's me.
I guess the next person will be Miss Jenny.
Yeah, go ahead, go, Jenny. You have to unmute
All
yourself.
right, I'm Jenny. Got it. Everybody can hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay, awesome. So I'm Jenny Diltz, and I accompany struggling people, people struggling in grief. And I help them convert grief into growth in whatever way that looks like for them. This topic of suicide and mental health is an important one to me. It's one of the one of the topics or one of the experiences that drew me into the grief field, I was privileged to help a friend in the aftermath of her sister's suicide. And it was a privilege to accompany her and walk with her every step of that process. And several of my clients have been affected by suicide also. So suicide is a topic that's very important to me, and I feel a sense of calling and urgency in helping people, especially affected by suicide. I also host the podcast Share Your Story, exploring humanity one heart at a time, where we dive deeply into grief experiences that people have had and showcase how they have turned that grief into growth. And some of the episodes are specific to suicide as well. My website is grievingcoach.com, and that's where you can find me. So happy to be here.
All right, next one, Dr. Burgett.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you all. It's an honor and a delight to be here. Anthony, I love what you said earlier. By not being bound to one particular institutions, you can bring multiple and fresh perspective to with different angle. I am Dr. Burgett Tan, and I am a certified grief specialist as well as trauma response practitioners and life mastery consultant with background in veterinarian medical oncologist. That's a bit of a mouthful, and I'm honored to be here. As Jenny mentions, it's a suicide addictions are very important topics that many times people know somebody who have experienced that directly and indirectly, and also but not have the opportunity to talk about it. So thank you, Tony, for having this panel today for us to be able to educate and support. Because to me, for when we talk about grief is a very painful thing, but the other side of grief, the other side of recovery, is hope, is possibility, it's purpose, it's love, it's being able to laugh and have joy again. And as Jenny and Jay Lewis mentions, to be able to transform your experience into something beautiful, whatever that's beautiful it is for you.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Dr. Burgett. Aruna.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Aruna. Hi, Tony. I am a holistic psychiatrist. I am from Wisconsin. I started my journey as a traditionally trained psychiatrist, pharmaceuticals and all that stuff, but my own health journey and the guidance from the universe took me down the path of functional medicine and Ayurvedic medicine, which I started to meld together. Started my practice in 2016, and really began to push the boundaries of what we can offer for patients struggling with mental health. And what I realized is that there are a handful of root causes, and when we address those root causes, which is typically from my experience, clinical experience, I figured it is wrong diet, trauma, and toxins. And trauma is where grief is also a kind of trauma. That's one of the it's to me. When I think about grief, I think of it in terms of trauma and the way that it affects the mind and the body. I mean, I say that trauma causes leaky gut and it causes a leaky mind. And then it can cause leaky heart, it can cause leaky liver,
It really depends on a person's genetic predisposition, their prior experiences as to what organs in their body are manifesting the leakiness because of grief or trauma. And but the hope and the good news is that with the right approach, with the right intervention, our mind-body systems are meant to be self-healing entities. I hate to call machines. We are not mechanistic at all. And it is as soon as we give the right input, we can see healing. In my own personal experience, I've seen that happen for all diagnoses, from schizophrenia to bipolar to trauma to depression and anxiety. So it's actually a very exciting time to be. And thank you for having me here, Tony.
You are very welcome. And welcome everybody here. My panelists, as you guys see, man, we got some amazing people up here. It's going to be a great conversation. If you guys don't know, it's your first time tuning in. I am Tony Lynch. I'm your host. I'm also the founder of the Global Grief Network. I'm also the founder of Memories Blessed, where we offer grief support to men. So, as you guys see, we got people from different backgrounds. We're posing a question. It needs to be talked about. It definitely needs to be talked about. Suicide addiction, the rise. What is going on in this world today? And the reason why we want to talk about it, because in a lot of ways, I've seen a lot of things. I've seen a lot of people get misdiagnosed. And so the question is it a mental health issue, or is it something different? And we're going to open up the conversations, and we're going to start this. We're going to unpack it. So if you guys are tuning in, let us know where you're from. Put your questions in the comment section. Let us answer them, and be a part of the conversation. All right, you guys. So I'm gonna open it up. Anybody want to go first?
I do. First off, Tony and I had like a 2.5-hour conversation on this subject, and honestly, yes, I think the grief addiction and grief, they kind of coincide. It's not necessarily a mental health thing, as it becomes a mental health issue over time. But it doesn't start that way. It starts where a person has maybe an issue or circumstance, and then they have some things that may happen. And when those things happen, it kind of increases the circumstance. For instance, like say somebody like Junior Seau. I was talking to somebody about him earlier. This gentleman, if you don't know him, he was a football player for the San Diego Chargers, and he had CTE. He wasn't born with a mental illness, but he acquired one over time. And he killed himself. He decided to shoot himself in the chest. And because he wanted science and doctors to examine his brain. That was the issue, because he was facing some circumstance. A lot of people, they assume that it's mental health issues from the door, or you grew up with it or something. I think it's more of an acquired circumstance. Maybe I'm talking a little too much into it, but that's the way I see it.
I would like to weigh in then to what you said, because the question was with the mental health per se. First of all, there are different perspectives. Mental health, and you can be predisposed to brain health issues. And I'm going to stress brain health issues, because the key organ that decides about everything, your thoughts, what chemicals are being released, how you react, what are your perceptions, is your brain. And because of trauma, you can develop certain types of, let's say, lack of oxygenation in a certain area of your brain, which will start to malfunction. Another thing that can happen, you might have trauma that you do not realize to the brain, which over time creates mental health. I don't like the word mental health issues. certain behaviors that are perceived as mental health. And we keep talking about mental health, but it's so complex. It is how you're raised. What is your environment? It is the food that the doctor mentioned, what you eat. If you're producing enough neurotransmitters in your gut, do you have veins that allow an oxygenation in your brain that allow those to get there? Dr. Amen did a study, and that was a huge study on NFL players whose personality would change after they stopped playing in NFL. And it turned out it was because of the trauma to their brain over and over and over and over again. And nobody addressed that. And when they didn't address that, behavioral changes showed up. And a lot of people said, oh, it's a mental health, he has aggression issues. This is one of the things that I truly believe is that nothing is what it seems. And we seem to like pills without truly looking into what is the root cause, because it might be just emotional, might be blood work. Feeling depressed can be combined with not having enough ferritin or iron or being depleted in D3. And you can feel depressed, not necessarily be depressed. Now, is there a clinical depression? Absolutely. There is clinical depression that comes out on scans. But there's such a wide range of things in the brain that happen that we experience as mental health issues that I would strongly think that it's not a one fix all. And your environment plays a role. Your food plays a role. People you surround yourself with play. Your predisposition plays a role. And how you live your life and how you take care of the most important organ, which is your brain, also plays a role. So is it a mental health crisis? I would say it's a society and our environment crisis, because we're losing the skills and things that we used to do to keep us in check and healthy. We overwork ourselves. We have too much of stress in our lives that very often we create. Just to be very clear, there are no animals chasing us on a daily basis. And there are so many other things like watching TV way too much, playing games, social media, the way TV is constructed to keep us in fear, in a state of fear, which influence how our brain functions. All of that, plus lack of connection, human connection, the release of dopamine. You need to hug somebody for 27 seconds for the dopamine to be released. How often do we really stop and hug somebody for 27 seconds? It's usually like, okay, we're good. Human connection. I can talk about experiments that were done. People die, humans die without human connection. And that influences your brain as well. It doesn't develop. There are plenty of things that influence our health, our brain health, which we, on everyday basis call mental health.
All right. We got a couple more people that just showed up. Benedict Howard, and we got Dorian. Either one of you unmute yourself, take a second to introduce yourself to the audience and everything. And when we come back, when they get done, anybody want to piggyback off of what the brain coach D just said? And we'll continue this conversation. You got to unmute yourself, Dorian.
There we go. All right. So my name is Dorian Johnson, and I am a part of the Global Grief Network. My background is I lost my son about 6 years ago, and since then, I've written a couple of books, co-authored an award-winning book, a memoir about looking for my son, and a memorial hike that we took. The second one is about the myths that go along with grief and loss, and so a big thing that I am working on with Kathy Gleason, Tony. Okay, so she's the vice president of the network. We're working on a book called The Chrysalis Effect, and we want to reach out to different people and have them tell their story about how coming out of their chrysalis and where they are at, and talk about their story. and allow them to tell their story, not in a victim way, not in a way that they've been told already that they're a villain in that. But we want to be able to walk back through there and say, but look at what you've learned. What are you grateful for? Look at the courage it took to do this and that. So I'm always honored when Tony asked me to be a part of a panel like this. So thank you.
Benedict, unmute yourself, introduce yourself for us. We can't hear you. Make sure your mic is connected. Okay. All right. Well, while he's figuring that part out, they brought up a lot of great things. Anybody want to piggyback off of there? I mean, we can go on and on forever about that, and I agree with her on a lot of those points. And Jay, we talked about this earlier. We talked about this yesterday, Dorian. Like I said, I have a problem with it, just like what most of us do. I have a problem with people being misdiagnosed and not getting the proper care that they need, and not having the real issues being addressed with it. And there needs to be a change. I know, during COVID and everything, the big huge thing was, the mental health was a problem. The mental health issues was a problem, and COVID actually exposed it. But I think people kind of overshot the real issues that was going on. It was just easier to say this person is struggling with this instead of saying, you know what, we need to dig a little bit deeper and see what's actually going on with this individual, so we can provide the necessary treatment for them to get better. So anybody else want to piggyback off of that?
Yeah. I'm going to take a stab at it. In fact, my thinking about all of this has evolved as I've grown as a human being, I would say. So, as I mentioned, I'm traditionally trained I began to see that with my training in functional medicine and Ayurvedic medicine, that there is no difference between mind and body. It's, mind, body, spirit, all of this is just one entity. And so I began to see mental illness as a whole body illness, because the mind is an abstract entity, and the mind requires the body and the brain to manifest itself. And so I really began to see mental health issues as a whole mind, body, spirit illness. And in some ways, I see this coming full circle, because if you look at the meaning of psychiatry, psyche, it doesn't just refer to the mind, it actually refers to soul. So psychiatry really means doctoring of the soul. And then as my evolution progressed further, and I've become more spiritual in my personal life, I have come to see all illness, not just mental health issues, all illness as representative of some sort of a spiritual crisis or a spiritual awakening. And really, as a psychiatrist, the milder this crisis is, then we see neurosis, meaning anxiety, depression, those kinds of issues. But the more severe it is possible to be going into the realm of psychosis and like bipolar and schizophrenia. And this has really been the evolved understanding of all these illnesses. And because of that, I agree with you, Tony, that the current diagnostic and statistical manual that we use does not even account for the lived experience of our patients. Like, for instance, when we see like somebody comes in with depression, the DSM says they should have loss of interest or sad mood. Those are the two, either one of these two symptoms to meet the major criteria for depression. And then in the minor criteria, it's focus, concentration problems, brain fog or fatigue, energy disturbance, sleep appetite disturbance. And we are told from the Guild of Psychiatry that all these, like, the brain fog, the fatigue, energy problems, sleep disturbances, all of that it's the depression causing. But how is depression causing it? Oh, it's a chemical imbalance, but 70 years of research has shown no chemical imbalance. Whereas now when we open up that, hey, maybe it's not just a chemical imbalance, it's not just in the mind or in the brain, let's look at what's happening. And we see that there is a breakdown in the physiological and metabolic functioning of the whole body. So focus concentration problems could be because you're having an unhealthy gut, so you're not digesting your food, absorbing your nutrients, and eliminating the waste. So you're becoming nutritionally deficient and toxic, so you're not going to be able to focus and concentrate. You're also going to be irritable when you're toxic. Jay, go ahead.
I wanted to say, first off, Dr. Rona, you're absolutely right. I think a big part of it is the fact that we get fed so much stuff. Like, we're told fast food is great for us. We're told that breakfast cereals are awesome. In reality, these things are like loaded with, maybe if it's cereal, for instance, loaded with sugar. We know that some people live on a fast food diet, and that creates so many problems with your gut. For instance, a study was done. If you notice, well, I don't know. I'm first off, Anthony, I'm from New Jersey too. So I wanted to say, but where I'm from in like the North area, there is a fast food restaurant on every block. There's one Whole Foods, one. And
right next to it, there's a bar too.
Yeah, right. There's a bar, a church, and a fast food restaurant. All three of those things are literally within a block of each other. And so now, when you're looking at, say, something like rates of suicide, addiction, things of that nature, yes, obviously, if you're living on a fast food diet, your mind is not thinking. We all know that the gut is our second brain.
Mhm.
And when we look at this, if you are feeding your brain horribles, if you eat McDonald's, Burger King, Wendy's every day or 4 days a week, then guess what? You're going to be more susceptible to things like addiction, to things like maybe suicide, because your thoughts are, you're thinking you're in a downtrodden situation. So maybe I feel like I deserve to live this way. And everything justifies that because, again, you're eating things that clearly aren't good for you. You're being influenced by things like television, for instance. I mean, in the hood, we know that people spend 3, 4, 5 hours a day watching television. So between fast food and 5 hours of TV, between and I'm sorry, 2 hours on your phone doing things like, looking at Facebook or looking at Instagram. Well, what time do you have to better educate yourself or to better work on your brain health or your stomach health? That's where I'm going with this.
I got a question. I want to bring something to the table because I hear what everybody's saying. the thing is that all of these things, all of these restaurants and fast food joints have been there for quite some time. They've been there since we were children, right? And most of them are still there. The one thing that has changed is throughout the last couple of years, we've seen a massive jump. We've seen a massive jump. When COVID hit, I understand there was some things that was revealed, but the rates of where the suicides are happening are just ridiculous. The rates at where the addiction rate has expanded is just ridiculous. The environments are still the same. The environments are still the same. Everything that's in the environment is still the same. There's
Actually,
something else that has changed. Though.
No, it's not. It's not
Well,
the same. We got
Well,
stuck
with the
in one
people, they're in a
with people, and the loneliness exploded. You had no other way of
Right.
connecting to people, and loneliness has been proven as one of the key killers. Japan is leading in suicides because of loneliness. They have now services where you rent people. You know, when I said the 27 seconds hug, which releases dopamine, that's prevention for loneliness. There are other studies that show that you need to be hugged 8 times a day to maintain healthy, functioning of your organism, of your body. Loneliness kills us. And because we're so with the TV, with our phones, and because we got separated from the live events and everything else, that skyrocketed. We didn't have the skills, and we don't, and we're not meant to be separated as a kind. Loneliness.
I need to check my mic. Am I coming through right now?
Yes. You are.
Oh, good. I had to reboot, blah, blah. Hey, my name is Benedict, and I've been listening to a lot of your conversations. I'm really in tune with where you're at, and I want to offer some suggestions.
Hold on, let her finish her statement real quick, because I want to hear. It's interesting what she said, and then we'll let you come in.
Sweet.
Go ahead, finish, Dee.
Okay, so loneliness, as it is, has been studied over and over. It is an epidemic. We're not connecting the same way. We're not building relationships the same way. We're not approaching each other. We're not hugging each other and then we can blame the Me Too movement. We can blame the progression. We can blame whatever we want to blame. We're not doing things the same way we used to do. And that's biologically just embedded in us. The loneliness is what drives the suicide, and there's no doubt about it. It's not even a correlation data. It's just repeated country after country, and we can observe countries that have even more advanced in loneliness, where they're looking for solutions. You have cuddling, people you can rent to cuddle with for an hour, which is absolutely non-sexual. You have people who are standing on streets and giving away hugs in the streets with the highest, in the cities with the highest suicide. You have so many different services now being, Dorian, you're super loud. There are so many different services that are being now offered because of prevention of loneliness. And the truth is the human connection is what keeps us alive and keeps us thriving, because it gives us purpose. And without purpose, there's no meaning. And if we don't have a purpose, we don't know why we're here, and we don't have that human connection, we lose our goal of living. There's no point. And when I lost my son, when he was 16 months old and he just fell asleep and never woke up, it was really hard to find that purpose. And it took rewiring of my brain and 12 years of work on me to be able to find a purpose outside of the outside world by internally. And most people don't have that privilege and skills to do that. So loneliness, I would say, is exactly what skyrocketed the suicide.
Okay. Benedict, go ahead, chime in on that.
Okay, I think that just checking the mic again.
No, you're good.
Okay, great. Is there a delay on there?
There is a slight delay on some people's platforms, but we're good. Okay,
great. Hey, I really appreciate being here and invited into this live stream today. I have a lot to share. I've been doing research. I was a clairvoyant as a kid, and I was a rally car driver and really successful. I could tear things apart, put them back together. I went into engineering. I worked for GE for a little bit, and I was a development engineer. And then my conscience got me in terms of like, I need to get out of this corporate bullshit. And I went to Africa in 83, 84.
All right, so he is frozen up. Anyone want to chime in? Jenny, Anthony, chime in, and
I'll take a stab at it.
Okay, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll take a touch on that. I love what Dominica says, that things are not the same, and I would agree with that, Tony. You know, yes, physically a lot of things still look the same, but really, to start with, talking about the increase in addictions, in the suicide, and so forth since the last couple years, grief, by definitions, by the Grief Recovery Institute, grief by definitions is the unsettling feelings caused by a loss, a change, or hope unmet. Let me ask everybody here and everybody listening, do you know a single person in your life who has not experienced a change in the last 3 to 4 years? And so in that scenario, we are all grieving. And we know that when we are grieving, depend on what support you have. And as Dominica's point out, nowadays the support can be very limited. And it's physical support, but also if you look in the mental health report, as well as you talk to people, there is a severe shortage of even just non-physical support. I have many clients who come to me and say, I got a 4, 5, 6 weeks waiting list to talk to a social worker, to talk to a psychiatrist or psychologist or what have you. And it's like the lack of support on somebody who's already grieving and having everything else is going on. And it's continuing on one after another. Every time you turn on the TV, I stopped watching TV long ago, but every time you turn on the TV, you look social media, you go out and stand outside your apartment, you hear something that adds to the hope unmet, the inflations. We're not going to get political, but the inflations, the what have you. It's just like one after another. And we know grief is cumulative and cumulatively destructive. Yes, emotionally, but like Dr. Aruna says, nowadays we also know that grief is grief is a lot about the heart, but also about the mind and also about the body. So the body part, you grieving, your body is experiencing it. We know very well, many of us probably has heard the term of Takotsubo cardiomyopathy, where your heart changes. And that's just an example. So anytime you hear this, it's impacted your heart, it's impacted your mind, it's impacted your emotion, it's impacted your body, and it's turned into a vicious cycle of now you hear something, you got stomach ache, and then you can't sleep, and guess what happened? It's just even more and more and more. And when we're not able to sleep, talking about brain, we're not able to rest well, our brain not able to function properly. It's just kind of, to me, it's all added to the whole thing. And to me personally, I beg to differ that nothing is the same as in the last 2, 3, 4 years. Even if it's physically the same building is still there, just the experience. And many times, I mean, having helped people with grief 26, 7 years, it's like everybody who has done that says one thing. Even if we recover from the heartbreak, our life is no longer the same. We're a different person. That 1 second changed us forever. I think probably practically everybody here has that experience. Even if you recover, yes, you can change the heartbreak to something positive. You're no longer the same person. It changed us forever. That's just my 2 cents.
I like that. I know Jenny had been waiting. You want to chime in?
Yeah, and I think I'm loving this conversation because there are so many different perspectives and so many insights about what's causing the rise in suicide, what's causing the rise in addictions. And one thing that I've learned in working with people who have been affected by suicide and also those who are trying to help in this suicide crisis, one thing that I've learned is that there's so much to suicide, and it's not a one size fits all. Each person's experience, every single suicide, is so much deeper than we can see on the surface. Even for those that are closest to that person who died by suicide, there are so many things that we don't see, hear, understand. And so after the death of suicide, there's no one to get answers. And so we still have all of the questions. And so it's really hard to, in some ways, it's really hard to help because there is no, oh, it's this or it's this. Each person's journey, experience, personality, brain, heart, emotional, spiritual, physical being is different. And all of these different parts play a role in a decision, an act, whether it's impulsive or planned, in a moment when that life is extinguished. The physical part of that life is extinguished.
I like to chime in just really quick. I would agree with that everything, suicide is such a complex thing. And back to the original questions, this is a matter of patience. Suicide is such a complex thing. And for many people, we think about it, it's everybody's going through things. There are people actually who has a we can say the predispositions might not be the most accurate word, and Dr. Aruna, you can correct me, but there are people who are a little bit predisposed to suicide thoughts. And there is a wonderful term, I am one of those, and I decided to forget that term altogether because I don't like to label myself, but certain people, certain individual, your car tire break down on the road, most people get upset. Certain people, and this is something I know, we have connections on that, and including myself. For certain people, your car break down on the road or your tire blow up, the first thought is not to call a mechanic or get upset or, oh my God, I'm going to be late. The first thought that comes to some people is, I can just kill myself, I'll be over, it'll be done. Anything that happen in life, the light bulbs goes out, and the first thing you come to your mind is, if I'm dead, I don't have to deal with this. and so certain people has a predisposition. So whether you want to call it genetic, and at the same time, I would agree with everybody else. Like we've heard the word genetic, we also heard the word epigenetic, where it doesn't matter what's going on with your genetic, you have the ability and the power to recognize what's going on, whether it's grief, whether it's genetic, whether combinations of everything else is, and then we can choose. But I love how you said it's just suicide is just kind of like one of those such an interesting combinations, and sometimes we never know. There are a few clients I've spoken and helped and discover that they struggle. Sometimes we approach it from certain things, but for those, I think one thing I want to say in here is for certain people, for certain client who has that predispositions, having that understanding actually can help make a huge difference. At least it was for me and for some people I work with.
So, Dr. Bridget, since you mentioned my name, and also I wanted to respond to both what Tony and Dominica said. So, Tony, you're right. The environment has been the same. But actually, if you look at I want to say World War II compared to today, pre-World War II, most families would eat pretty much close to 100% of their meals at home. Whereas today, the statistic is that it's 50% of our meals are eaten outside of the home. So yes, the fast food gets the bad rap, but even mid-range restaurants like P.F. Chang's and other restaurants where you spend a lot of money. I'm not talking about the very expensive restaurants where they're farm to table and everything is organic, but most of the restaurants that even I frequent, you have to be careful because the oil, the ingredients that they use are not designed for health. They're designed for shelf life of the food and to make it tasty, and our nutritional needs are not met. Then the second thing, which kind of ties into the epigenetics, is that, so let's say from World War II to today, we have had so many generations of people that have been consistently exposed to the effect of these toxins and the lack of nutrition and all of that. With each successive generation, because of the epigenetic changes for the bad, it is actually getting worse and worse in subsequent generations. So today's children are going to be more susceptible to the effect of environmental toxins than their grandparents were. Like the first time when DDT was introduced, many people were able to be okay with it, but their children and their grandchildren, even though DDT has been banned in the 70s, they exported it to India, which is where I grew up, and I attribute some of my health issues to, because every summer I was exposed to personal story. But what's happening is that the children today, babies today, are being born with DDT in their bloodstream, and not just DDT, but 80,000 chemicals that have not been tested. That's one point. But I actually, again, like I said, my evolution reflects my thoughts about all of this. I would go beyond loneliness. I would say that it is a spiritual crisis. And when I mean spiritual, it's a disconnection from self. It's disconnection from others, from each other, which is what I think loneliness that Dominica is talking about, and also disconnection from a higher power. And when we're basically becoming unmoored. And our culture, whether it is the TV programming, it is a programming, or the way we are supposed to, everything about that we are being programmed into. Currently, the message we are giving is that it's a very lonely existence. There is nothing to life beyond this world. There is no afterlife. There is no higher power. And that disconnection with that higher power actually is a disconnection with our own self. Now, I truly believe that this is the reason for all mental illness, all physical illness, including addiction. Cigarettes are not a gateway drug. Alcohol, marijuana, they are not gateway drugs. It's this trauma and grief and disconnection from your own self I see that as the gateway drug. So, and I will also say that epigenetics, we usually think of it in terms of, okay, let's say that there's generational trauma that affected the epigenetic changes in that one generation, which is then getting passed to the second generation and the third generation. We have an understanding of this, which is that the negative effects of the environment is getting passed down. But I want to introduce that even the positive effects of our life experience can also be passed down. Because genes are malleable, especially even our brains, every cell in our body is constantly in interaction with its environment, with other cells, but also in interaction with the external environment. And when I say the external environment, I'm not only talking about the food, but also the toxins, of course, but also the emotional environment that we are providing. Which is why I used to be, when I was doing mainstream psychiatry, oh my God, I used to be very pessimistic. If I diagnose somebody with schizophrenia, I'm like, oh my God, this person is doomed. They're not going to get better, because that is what I was taught. And we do think within the bounds of our experience. But as I became more holistic and then more spiritual, I began to see that I cannot predict anyone's progress. And I really I invite the divine to help me in this process as a healer. And in the way that I think, I've seen that my patients with schizophrenia, of course, I'm not giving them a false hope, but I'm seeing that when I keep my expectation neutral, let's see what's going to happen if I provide what is missing for this person. And I've been amazed. Like, I see patients with bipolar disorder completely recover without needing medications. I've seen patients with schizophrenia completely recover. And so this has been my personal experience. So now I feel very excited because I am almost recognizing that there is nothing that we cannot heal from. And then my journey took me to Dr. Joe Dispenza's work. I highly encourage everyone to read the book Becoming Supernatural by Dr. Joe Dispenza. In fact, he starts off with the case of a woman that he worked with, who was a psychologist in Sweden with 2 children, and everything was going perfectly well. But one day, when her children are about 11 and 12 years old, she sees that it's a Sunday afternoon. It's just a lazy afternoon. And the one thing that's missing is that her husband's nowhere around. She's calling him, he doesn't respond. And then around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the police come home, and she and her children receive the news that he jumped off the tallest building in Sweden. He did not leave a note, nothing. And it came as a complete shock to her system. And then she finds out she's a psychologist in a good position, making money. He was a lawyer, supposedly making money, but he made very bad investments and lost all of their financial savings. So she not only lost him, but she also lost the money. Then she became depressed, understandably. Then she developed an autoimmune condition. And then within 2 years, she was diagnosed with cancer. But with the power of mind over matter, and in doing the meditations that Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about, she actually, within 6 years, she was, after her husband's death, she was completely able to turn her life around. Completely healed from cancer. She did not receive surgery, chemotherapy, radiotherapy, healed her depression, healed her trauma, was able to forgive her husband. And apparently today she is, of course, her identity is not mentioned. He only calls her Anna in the book. But she is running a mental health facility in Sweden with about 20 practitioners. She's living a life of abundance. She's been able to kind of give her children the kind of life that she envisioned. So anything is possible. And especially in working, and I'm getting trained in Dr. Dispenza's work as well. I'm actually feeling very, very hopeful and optimistic. Yes, bad things happen to good people. The crisis that we experience, the grief that we go through, they happen to good people and bad people. But the crisis that this happens, it's a wake-up call for most of us, which is, I can see from all the things that each one of you is doing. It was a wake-up call, and you heeded that wake-up call. And you have been able to turn that around in one way or the other. And even though the trauma, the grief does affect our body and our mind, we can rise above it. We can find our purpose again. We can find healing and love and joy again. This, again, like I said, 10 years ago, if you had spoken to me, I would have had a completely different take on that. But my life experiences have forced me to kind of push the boundaries of my own thinking. And I know I may sound overly optimistic when I say this, and I really want to emphasize that I'm not giving anyone false hope. It takes a lot of work to rise above our circumstances, to rise above the limitations that we impose on ourselves. But the core issue that I see is loss of self-worth. When we don't value ourselves, that's when we make bad choices in how we eat, how we move, how we think about ourselves as well. So I agree. I mean, to me, grief and trauma, I use that interchangeably. And Dr. Bridget, you said it very well. It's a change, it's hope not met, and it's a loss. And that, to me, that's what trauma is also about. But I would really say that there is a lot to be hopeful for. And even the larger crisis that we are seeing, I mean, how COVID happened, yes, I do not agree with much of the things that were being said. But look at how many people are waking up, are questioning how things are going, and really, coming out and becoming more aware of themselves and their surroundings. I think that it's all going to be, again, I don't mean to be unnecessarily optimistic and hopeful, but I genuinely believe that it's going to be all right. It's that we are, and with all the work that we are doing, I do think that it's going to be all right. Thank you.
I just want to back, sorry for jumping in, but I just want to back Dr. Aruna. Prior to, let's just say, having a little bit more awareness, I used to have my medical record. Looks like an encyclopedia. I mean, the physicians have to carry it like that because I have something wrong with every single body system. Even things like liver, kidney, you name it. And when I have better awareness and healed my heart, healed my mind, it's naturally healed my body, so much so my current physician is envious of my health. And so I hear you. And does it take work? Absolutely. But as Dr. Aruna say, it's possible. We can have loss, we can have trauma, but the other side of that is hope and possibility and purpose.
Yeah, I think I'm going to add to it before it goes to you, Tony. What I was talking, when you said higher power, that's what I meant with purpose, because it's loving yourself and seeing why you're doing the things you're doing. I don't know who's listening to us, but also I want to mention that there's place for everything. And there's place for spirituality, there's place for doctors, there's place for people like me who work without medicine, with all the other natural methods. But make sure you explore all the options to heal yourself, because what works for one person might not work for another. And sometimes you do need the medical intervention. That's not the only solution, but it is one of the solutions. So it's important that we give our listeners, whoever is listening to us, the ability to choose. But all of the methods we're talking about are part of a wider range, and what works for you, Arana, and for Dr. Bridget might not work for somebody else. Somebody might need a medical intervention and they're better. That's the time to move on to the natural methods and start working on healing. So make sure, if you are experiencing trauma and suicide thoughts, there is of course the line 988, and it's worth mentioning 988. They have people 24/7. So if you're going through something, give that number a call. There are coaches, therapists, psychologists, life coaches, plenty of us out there who are here to support you. But don't discard any of the options you have. Try whatever you can, and whatever works for you. We all are going to support your choices. That's probably how I would like to sum what you girls were saying.
Actually, Dominica, being a psychiatrist, trained in the science of pharmacology, psychopharmacology, and having given that up very intentionally, if anything, I would say that we should not be starting anyone on a psychiatric medication as a first line. Absolutely. I completely stand.
That's what Dr. Amen teaches, and that's why he trained us coaches. So before you go to pharmacology, you work with us, and we do everything without medication. Before we say, hey, all of that didn't work, talk to a psychiatrist trained by Dr. Amen, who believes in holistic approach. He has a very specific approach, very different to most psychiatrists.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with Dr. Amen's approach. Yeah, but mine is actually it's a little different. I'm trained in functional medicine and Ayurvedic medicine, and I can tell you that when we don't start with psychiatric medications, it literally takes 4 weeks, 2 to 4 weeks, literally, for people to turn around when we address the whole mind, body, spirit system and all these 3 things. And so that definitely I can say from my experience, because my program is actually only 6 months long, and irrespective of what disease they come in with, I'm able to show that people can heal very, very quickly. It doesn't take long. So I'll say that, and I will, yeah.
Hold on, Jay. Anthony's been waiting so patiently to chime in. Let him chime in. He and I we had an awesome conversation earlier about pretty much the same thing. And I think what he's going to bring to the table is going to be very insightful. I love what everybody's saying. I totally agree. I love all of that because it all plays a part in it, and what we're seeing nowadays. And one of the things I just wanted to add in, I was talking to one of my colleagues a couple of days ago, is the metal increase in our bodies. I think I was actually listening to Tony Robbins interview, and he was talking about how they found that the increase of metals that he had in there contributed to a lot of the disorders that he was going through, and how he had to go through and detox himself, to get all of these things out of his body and to get him functioning on a level to where he was actually okay. Right. So I did put that in the comments. I was like, the metal increase in body through the foods that we eat, fast foods and things like that, things that people don't even talk about. They put it out there. I mean, it's public knowledge, but I don't think people really pay attention to it. I think they just are addicted to the additives in the food, which, I get it. I do get it. So Anthony, you want to go ahead and chime in on that?
Sure. Absolutely. I want to dial the conversation back to, say, the psychological relationship between us and positive emotion. Now, anyone trained or not, whatever have you, please stop me if I've gotten any of this wrong. Now, just hear me out. See, the probability of someone being happy over the long term, just because you've accomplished something, whether it be a diet goal or you quit smoking or whatever have you, is virtually zero. Long-term happiness doesn't come from accomplishment. And there's only one explanation for this. Positive emotion isn't designed for celebration. Positive emotion is used as an indicator that you're progressing towards a valued goal. Accomplishment technically is a satiation reward. So it stops the positive emotion program from running once you've accomplished whatever you were aiming at. So it's very important to have your goals and the pathway forward to be as clear and as defined as possible for that psychological fact alone. And then the next question is then, what's the most valued goal? And I suppose that's entirely up to you to answer. Because, I mean, there's also truth in that. Because you can't, a lot of it has to do with identity loss. So you can't assume the proper identity without the you can't assume the proper identity with the proper goals without telling the truth honestly to yourself and everyone around you. And that's a pretty difficult thing to do. You have to be willing to admit to yourself what you really think and feel, and be willing to communicate it to others, and to have a group of like-minded individuals that'll accept that information and reflect it back to you. Also back to the beginning of the conversation, Dominica, right, was talking about the lack of skills, and grief in all likelihood is a skill set. And it's just like making friends and keeping a social relationship. It doesn't have to necessarily be like something that you work on constantly 24/7, but it definitely is a skill set. And unfortunately, we as a society wholesale have lost the ability to privately grieve, and by extension to publicly grieve. Because to be honest, there's not much more people want than to be attended to. That's kind of why the reason advertisers do so much to garner attention. Attention is the fundamental currency between humans. So to pay attention to other people, you're likely to receive massive returns of investment in the near future. Even if the relationship or the circumstance doesn't go the way you wished it to go, you've still learned something extremely valuable about both yourself and other people. And there's a huge problem with in today's society, unfortunately, with the terms power and ambition. For whatever reason, in today's realm, we've made that a bad thing. To have power, to have ambition, to be aggressive, and that's not to say to use it on others for your own gain, because that's not the point of aggression. Because if you're not at war physically, emotionally, whatever have you, you're at least at war with life. And life will not back down. She'll play a relatively fair game depending on the context or the circumstance. But you need to be aggressive to fight properly, and you need to be integrated with your own aggressiveness and dark side in order to do that. And well, in our society today, I know I keep saying that, I apologize, but we ignore these things, and to ignore it and say that aggression is bad, power is bad, ambition is bad, just outright with no discussion, will invariably cause people to not display their own natural competitive nature, even towards themselves and just towards life. And life will wholesale devour you if you don't stand up for yourself. Just life itself, not anyone else or anything. So in order to be actually good and to do good, you must be aggressive and be integrated with your aggressiveness, because the forces of evil itself will be aggressive. And that's not to say aggression is to take a club and beat someone over the head with it. I reiterate, it takes a sophisticated integration of ambition and love to be an appropriate warrior. Because what's the alternative to that? Well, the alternative is the person will eventually turn that aggression onto themselves. Since it's separate and not integrated, the rage and aggression will be working autonomously. So if it has nothing to connect to, you're its next target. And even psychophysiologically speaking, anger suppresses fear, because flight isn't always the response that's required. And rendering yourself harmless doesn't necessarily mean you don't do any harm. It just means you're prey. So I think that we need to, as a unified group, remove the current stigmas on the definitions of power and ambition and aggression, because these things are necessary for you to thrive, and we live in such a culture of guilt and shame, and because you're this, you have to do that, and because you're that, you have to do this, and it's just so linear. We have to push back against that boxing of definition, I should say, and the conversation. Oh, sure, absolutely.
Yeah, I got a question. I just want to tie it back into the topic that we're talking about.
Yeah, sorry, I
kind of going off topic a little bit and everything. So when we're talking about that and adding those things in, how does it factor into the fact of the suicide and the addiction rates and things like that? Because a lot of what you're saying, and I get what you're saying, can be very dangerous to the individual who does not understand it. That can put them in a really bad situation if they don't understand the fight that they're in.
Right.
And having so much aggression can be very dangerous to other people around that individual.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why it needs to be integrated.
Especially if you're prone to violence, and not understanding not understanding the aspects of what's going on with your body, right? Or your mind, your gut, your heart, your emotions and things like that. That can be turned around in a way to where we can be looking at another school shooter, right? We could be looking at another Uvalde situation, another Buffalo, New York situation.
Well, those situations are the expression of detached aggression. What I'm talking about is specifically integrated aggression, because you're absolutely correct. Detached aggression, it turns into suicidal ideation when at the point where the separate unintegrated aggression turns on yourself, and that's where you get the suicide rates, and that's where you get active shooters and stuff like that, and even just low resolution, just you want to go out and fight, and social media disinhibits that, so you could just go on social media, pick an argument with somebody and stuff like that. No, and I absolutely agree that it's a very delicate thing to work with, and that's why the pathway forward and your understanding of positive emotion, accomplishment, goals have to be very clear. That's the whole point. And I'm not, like I said, the point of aggression isn't to use it against other people. It's to use it against yourself in life when yourself in life start to fight against you. Because if life and yourself are fighting you, there's something that's disintegrated within your psyche. And I know I kind of pulled the conversation into a more essence type of conversation, but yeah, I mean, I was just about to say that earlier when we were talking, I came in contact with the idea that we think in narratives, so the stories that we think are also stored in our body. That was to bring it back to the physical end, because if you've had terrible things happen to you in your past, your body literally continues to tell you that present danger, if it's still unresolved, is still out there. So you will respond accordingly. And to bring it back, if your aggression isn't integrated properly, you're going to use it in ways that are unconscious. You're going to be mean, nasty to people, and you don't even mean to. You're going to use it against yourself and pin all of the shame and guilt and blame on you. And it's what's the logical conclusion of shame and guilt and burdensomeness is, well, I'm not good enough anymore.
Before we get into that, I'm gonna piggyback off of that. Jenny has to go, and I want her to come up here. She want to add in some other things, but I'll definitely piggyback off of there, because there are some things that I may or may not agree with, and I just want to add a different perspective and give an opportunity for some more depthness into it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Go ahead, Jenny.
Thank you. I do have to go soon, so I wanted to chime in one last time before I go. What has resonated with me most during this conversation was going back to Dr. Aruna about the connection piece. Whether that's a disconnect from ourselves, from others, from our higher power, whatever that power is, that part really resonated with me. And also, through the work that I've done, through people that I've met, I understand that sometimes the choice, and I'm not encouraging suicide in any way. And I also understand that sometimes the pain is so great that there is some comfort in suicide. So I don't encourage it in any way. Life is so precious. Every life is precious. And I believe that when life ends in suicide, it's not the end of their progression. There still can be hope for that person. There still can be growth. There still can be healing, even after a death by suicide. And I thank you all so much for your thoughts, your comments, your love, your support, and your time in allowing me to be here. So I'm going to sign off. Thank you all.
I just want to say
Thank
one
you for
thing.
being
real
on,
quick.
Jenny. It was great seeing you again. And thank you for your input on that and everything. I can't wait to see you and see Little Man and everything. And hey, you know, make sure he don't beat you up too bad. Make sure he don't beat you up too bad. Yeah. But as always, man, it's always good to have you on here, Jenny. And we will definitely connect soon. You have a great night, and yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Go ahead, Jay Lewis. Go ahead.
I just wanted to, first off, I wanted to acknowledge Dr. Runa because she did say something important. She talked about the aspects of spirituality. There are so many people that right now we're being told that, you know what? Hey, I'm born, I'm going to die. That's it. And what we don't understand is that, again, whatever the stat is out there, I've heard we're 1 in 400 trillion. But if that's the case, that means you bumped off so many versions of you on the way to the egg. Versions that could have been president, versions that could have helped solve cancer, but you got in. And since you got in and you were born, well, what are your plans now that you're here? Are we all planning? We got a job as a UPS driver. Okay, great, excellent. Do you think that the higher power said, you know what, maybe you should be a UPS driver? And again, nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying that it means that maybe if we tap more into our spirituality, we'll realize that being the UPS driver is just a segue to where we actually need to go. You know, we may have to have this job to take care of our life situations, but in the meantime, it's like, maybe I like playing guitar. Maybe I like doing what, I'm just saying this, you know, maybe I like doing something else. Okay, let me maintain my job at UPS and let me work on this other skill. And perhaps this other skill might be more of towards my spiritual essence, you know, and that's my whole thing. But then also, Anthony, real quick, I just wanted to say, I absolutely understand. I mean, I was just literally reading something by Jordan Peterson, and the guy was talking about, you know, you got to be a monster, but you got to find a way to control it. And it's interesting when you think about that, because you're right. There are times where, you know, hey, our amygdala will kick in the whole fight or flight aspect of things. But then there are also times where we have to fight against the amygdala and our will has to take over our thought. And there might be a time where we have to address a certain situation. But again, we also have to learn how to control the aspect. We can't make it into a mass anger situation where we end up, you know, doing like what happened to the guy in Florida, what the guy in Florida did. That's not our thing. But it's about being able to take that aggression and use it to serve our purpose. For instance, Buster Douglas knocked out Tyson in 90.
Hold on,
Man.
hold on. Let's
Go ahead,
tie it back into the topic. We're going way off topic. Let's tie it back into the topic and try to stay on that path. So go ahead, tie that in.
Well, you know what? I'm not going to have the Tyson analogy now. Forget it. But the point I'm making,
we're going off topic. We're trying to stay on topic here. I get what you're saying.
The reason why I brought up seriously, the reason why I brought up Buster Douglas was because he had 4 different situations that created his grief. His mother died. His baby's mother was going through cervical cancer. You know, he was a 42-1 underdog. All these things could have resulted in him going the other way. But he decided to find a way to use this to knock out Tyson. That was kind of my point. My point was that we can control where we go. If we choose to take the suicide ideation, then that means that we have allowed all of those things, taking the Buster Douglas scenario, we've allowed all those things to capture us to a point where we feel like Dr. Tan said, you know what, man, maybe I should just die. Or we can do what Buster Douglas did and decide that all these things, I'm going to turn them around. I'm not going to take the suicide route like everybody else would probably take. I'm going to fight Mike Tyson and knock him out. That's where I was kind of going with this.
Understand. I get it. I understand what you were doing. I think that with that analogy, if someone doesn't understand, it can cause more confusion than it does answers. You understand? You know, because just because we understand where it's coming from, one of the listeners might look at that and be confused as all get out, and then their ideology it can actually play a detrimental role on them because they may see that situation totally different. You know what I'm saying? They can totally take that in a different way. I want to give Dorian a chance to chime in and give his input on this.
Okay, thank you. And you know, I'm honored to be here, and all of the different things that we're talking about. Part of the reason I'm honored is I feel like I'm one of those ones who I bring experience to the table. It's not the things that I've studied or anything like that. It's just, you know, going through certain things and learning from those experiences. Okay. So, you know, there are certain things that we've talked about today. One of them is, you know, a disconnection from ourselves, from a higher power, from anybody who feels like they can support us. That disassociation is so difficult to even explain to somebody when you're trying to form a sentence. When somebody says, "Good morning, how are you?" It takes me back to a couple of things. I remember just after my son passed away. He passed away over just before Memorial Day weekend. And so spring is, you know, the snow is going away and spring is there. And one of the most amazing things that we would do would go outside and look at the stars. And it always comforted me to look up there. And it was almost like it was just enveloping me. I loved it. But when, after he passed away, I would wake up in the middle of the night because I couldn't sleep, and I would walk out and nothing made sense to me. I would look at those stars and there was no concept of what anything meant at that point. The struggle that I have is I honestly say this all the time, that losing my son has been one of the easier things I've had to deal with in the last 6 years. My mom passed away since my son passed away, but relationships inside my family, just different things are just such a struggle for me. And I have had no support. Like to sit down and to say, this is what I'm feeling, this is what I'm going through. And I made a comment early on, not long after my son passed away, just saying, it just feels like my mind is broke. And I had somebody look at me and say, well, just fix it. Just fix your mind, fix how you'll think. And I said, it doesn't work that way. And so the disassociation, even to just sit down and the exhaustion, the brain fog, the things that are supposed to matter so much to us, I don't care about anymore, or I don't know how to care about anymore. And so it's the fact of taking the time to make the connections with people, and which I've been able to receive, and I say that receive so much. And we talk about the spiritual aspect of things. One of the most beautiful things is that my son is with me all the time, all of the time. And I if I go out and into the mountains, I was a little late today because I went up in the mountains with someone, and it was beautiful up there, and the wind is blowing, and I know when I feel the wind, that's him right there by me, right? And so I've always been like, okay, what do I need to know? Now, we talk about the support, the people who don't understand. Those are the people that it's such a struggle that we're supposed to be around, family or friends or whatever. But if they take something away or make us feel like, well, I'll even use the word gaslight us in a way that makes us feel more crazy than what we're already feeling because of our grief, because nothing makes sense. We don't have answers. Okay. One thing that I understand about what suicide is and what it means is this. It's before my son passed away, he was in a really, really dark place, and he didn't know what to do, what to say, who to talk to. And he and I were not in a good place, on good terms. And so I ended up having a dream. And in this dream, I have 3 other kids, and they all came up to me and just gave me the side hug, hi, Dad, and they just moved along. Well, my son, he came up and he threw his arms around me and gave me a hug like he was just wasn't gonna, he couldn't hold on. And I remember so vividly saying, are you okay? What's going on? And this is the key to me, where somebody says, okay, I'm just done. I don't care anymore. I remember him so vividly saying, I'm just tired and I don't want to do this anymore. And so many times in my life, and I'm holding him and I'm looking around to see who could I get him to, and I can't find anybody. And I wake up thinking, just, what do I do? Well, I had a conversation and he's like, I know exactly where, when that was. But I don't dare say that to very many people when somebody says, are you doing okay? What's going on? I'm just tired and I don't want to do this anymore. It just means I just want to rest. I want to lay down and bleed. I just want to stop doing whatever's happening just for a minute. you know? And I think so many times that's where a lot of people are when we talk about people just being done, and not, it's not that they don't care. It's the fact of, it seems like that's the only way to solve a problem, that even if somebody says, do you want to talk about it? Hell no, I don't want to talk about it, because it's so frustrating, because the words aren't going to solve the problem for me, right? So here's the thing that I think of, is that I look at, for me, the day that we found my son, and he went hiking on Thursday. He went hiking up in the mountains, and he came down by a river that was too high because of spring runoff, and we found him on Saturday just before noon in the river. And I remember it was almost as if I went down a hole, and I call it 50 Shades of Grief. The reason I say that is because I know I hit 49, because in my mind, I landed right on my back, looking up. If I landed on my stomach, face down, and whatever, fill in the blank was down there, I would be at 50, right? But now what it is I landed in level 49. What that means is that was the deepest, almost the deepest you can go. So when somebody says, I'm going through this, I'm going through this, I'm going through this, I know that I can sit with them. I can go to that level 49 with them. I don't want to, but I can, right? And I don't have to be the one asking questions in that. I can just sit there and just say, what is it that you need? And what is it that you want? And they don't have to answer. I can sit with them until they say, I'm good now, right? So to take that one step further, the addictions, the anger, the aggression, the suicide, the bullying, the domestic violence, the substance abuse, the on and on and on and on, to me, those are just the communications of saying, I'm hurting. I hurt, right? My communication has always been anger. Okay. So I want to just say, we talked about experiences. Simon Sinek did an interview one time, and I don't remember who he was interviewing, but they was talking about there's known experiences and unknown experiences. Known experiences, we use skills. Unknown skills don't apply. That's where our attributes, our characteristics, our virtues kick in, and that's what we can use. That's what we have to use, right? And so, because it's like muscle memory in that. So if there's an unknown, like my son passing away, getting a divorce, going through different things, I have never been there. I don't know how to feel. I don't know what to do. So I have to have courage. I have to have integrity. I have to have these different things that still define me in that situation, right? It doesn't take anything away from me. So I want to say this, that when I look at somebody who talks about like a suicide prevention or suicide awareness program, the concern that I have is that we look at this and say, okay, you guys are in charge of this person. Let's make sure that they're okay. Let's make sure that they're doing well. The concern I have is if they are good and I say, okay, I'm going to go out of town, I'm going to go do something for me, and all of a sudden something happens, who do I put the blame back on? Okay. What I've learned is this. We are so concerned about talking about the cliff that people are getting close to. Don't talk. But if we talk about the fence at the top of the cliff to protect them from jumping off or falling off, instead of having the ambulance at the bottom that's going to help solve the problem, what I've learned is I love walking up to somebody And if they're struggling in that, I love walking up to them and saying, you know how freaking awesome you are? Do you know how cool you are? You are a rock star. I want to be like you when I grow up. Do you know why? Because of your courage, because this, you're always so kind. And it's like putting my arm around them, turning them around and walking away from the cliff, so to speak, and the cliff goes away because all of a sudden I see them for who they are, and they have someone who sees them for who they are. I see the virtues in them, and it's almost as if it's an instant gratification of being kind, because I get something out of it. The oxytocin kicks in. All of the happy hormones kick in, right? And that person says, maybe I am cool. And all of a sudden, it's an instant gratification for me because I recognize something that I'm seeing in them and they see it in me, right? So we look at this, and very simply, I'll start wrapping it up. Just one more minute, okay? The fact of looking at, I'm tired and I don't want to do this anymore. We look at the aggression. We look at the frustration, the addictions. My addiction after getting divorced and losing my son was fishing. Okay. It was because I was getting away from reality. I was getting away from people who were not safe. I was getting away from so many things, and I was able to think through, and yet I still leaned so hard on that. Okay. And it still affected me. I wasn't who I could be because that's all I could do. I just knew how to go fishing, right? But now to say, I love being able to look at somebody and say, I know who I am. I define myself by the virtues inside of me, and no one can take that away, right? So if I say, I spell my name, if I say my name is Dorian, and I say D is for dignity, O is for originality, R is for respect, I is for individuality, A is for authenticity, and N is for nobility. No one can take that away from me. And if I can be a beast, it's not dead. It's not asleep. It's there. It's not waiting to come out of and be aggressive. It's there. I know it's there, and I choose whether or not to use it, right? And so the virtue of courage and patience, tolerance and acceptance and kindness are all there. The long and short of it is we're all climbing a mountain. We're all climbing a mountain, and we forget how far up the mountain we are. And I want to look at somebody and say, let's do this. I want to look at how far you are. I want to look at where you came from, and I want to say, what are you grateful for in between? What experiences have you had in between that have made you who you are? And not as a victim, not as a villain. I want to look at this and say, it took so much courage. It took so much wisdom. It took so much fairness. It took so much discipline, but humility for you to get to where you are. Let's talk about some of these experiences and tell your story in a way that you are a hero. You are not going to ever be, in my eyes, a victim because of who you are. That is how we heal, by realizing who we are as we come out and we spread our wings on our chrysalis and are ready to fly. We can say, I am a butterfly. I know who I am. It's not the end of my life, but I guarantee the rest of my life is going to be way different than before. It's going to be beautiful because I know who I am, and I know how to handle the beast inside of me.
Thank you, Dorian, for that. Man, wow. it's been a great conversation tonight, and we're going to have a lot more of these coming up. So the people who are tuning in, and you guys, thank you for supporting us. Thank you for tuning in, and thank you for the messages that you guys leaving up there, the comments and everything. So before we take off, I would like my guests to leave you guys with some words, let you know where you can find them, and we look forward to having many more of these. So I'm gonna go ahead and keep my mouth shut, and I'm going to hand it off to the next person. All right, Dominica, you want to go start it off?
Thank you for having me, first of all. And it was a privilege and a pleasure to hear different perspectives. It's kind of interesting how we often say the same thing using different vocabulary or a little bit different view, but it all boils down to the same. And it's so amazing that we are able to offer people different perspectives because everybody is different. So they have their choice of what works for them. Dorian, I can absolutely relate to you to the numbness. I had it for 2 years after my son died. I don't remember anything from those 2 years besides my eyelashes hurting, my hair hurting, my nails hurting, and nothing was joyful. So that is an experience that when you lose somebody you really love is a part of a human experience. How can you find me? Well, Your Brain Coach D on Facebook, Your Brain Coach D on Instagram, Your Brain Coach D at gmail.com, yourbraincoachd.com, and Your Brain Coach D on LinkedIn, and everywhere else as Dominika Staniewicz, which you see my name. And that's how you can, guys, reach me. And thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Dr. Brigitte.
Thank you, Tony, and thank you. It's an honor and a delight to be here and listen to everyone's perspective. Like Dominika says, many times we say same or similar thing in a different manner, but we know that people sometimes need to hear things in a way that they can hear. So it's beautiful community to be able to be here. How can you find me? A few easy way to connect with me. The first one is you're welcome to directly email me, drtan4grief@gmail.com. That is one of the easiest way to connect with me. Doctor, it's drtan, T-A-N, for grief@gmail.com. You can find me on Facebook from grievingtojoyfulliving.com. You can find me on Instagram and website joyfulrichesbeyondgrief.com. As well as, again, but the easiest way is to just email me, drtan4grief@gmail.com. And if you are facing challenging times, if you are somebody who is facing a challenge, having a loss, a change, a hope unmet in any shape or form, and you feel that you might benefit either for yourself or to help this person, feel welcome to connect with me. As an honor to Tony and this community, I'm happy to provide a complimentary initial consultations to you because life is challenging as it is, and when we're able to support each other, we can make it just a slight of a hair sometimes allow us to breathe a little moment.
Okay, go ahead, Dorian.
All right. I love this conversation, and I'm honored to be able to share like where my journey from not knowing even how to take it to that next breath or the next step, or how to face whatever my purpose was at the time and still is now. It's an amazing thing and a beautiful thing to be able to share that with people. And I heard a quote not long ago, and it just said, "No one knows how much violence it took to become this gentle." I don't know who said that, but I love it. And it just is experience after experience, time after time, just realizing what needs to happen in that moment, you know. Not thought. Dorian Johnson. It'll have a picture of my son there. Also, I've got another group called A Day in the Life of Grief. And if you go over on Amazon, my 2 books, the first one is The View from Above. And then the second one is called A Day in the Life of Grief. And then that's probably the easiest way to get a hold of me is on Facebook. Friend me. My email is, I'll put it in the comments, but it's Kid, KID, ATHART. So there's no HEART, HART at gmail.com. So thank you for each one of you to share all of this stuff, because it helps me to understand that there's so much more to this than it's so much bigger than all of us. So, and thank you, Tony, again.
Runa?
Thank you, Tony. And it has been my absolute honor and pleasure to have spent this last 90 minutes plus with you guys. It has been, I'm really, again, I'm reminded of the humanity and the trials and tribulations that we all face, and the overcoming of these trials and tribulations. I think that to me is what humanity is about. And I can be reached at trinergyhealth.com. That's TRINERGY health.com. And I also just started a new website. It's psychiatry2.com. Both these websites, people can reach me. My email is office@psychiatry2.com, and Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube is all with the handle @Trinergy Health. And I've also given my phone number. It's 262-955-6600. And I definitely would like to say that, again, as I mentioned, my perspective has evolved to one of optimism. And I do hold that for every one of us. Life is about highs and lows, and it is also about learning how to serve the highs and lows, and it can be done. So that I'll end with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Runa. Anthony.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. I am grateful for having the opportunity to tell. I didn't really tell my story, but I kind of told a little bit of perspective of where I'm coming from, stuff like that. I'm excited to have more opportunities to do the same thing and talk to the community at large as well. I plan on I have a podcast as well. It's called Retrograde Philosophy. I plan on expanding that and having guests in the interest of the Global Grief Network, because I love the mission. I love what we're doing here. I love what Tony brings to the table. So I want to expand on that as much as I can in a personal and as professional way as possible. And you can reach me at psychology.major91791@outlook.com. I have Facebook as well. Anthony Hess on Facebook. That's fine. And I just want to say one last thing before I hand it off, and that's faith. Faith is an enterprise of courage and trust that must be maintained at all costs. And I hand it off.
First off, absolutely agreed, and thank everybody, because the various perspectives were absolutely awesome. So again, thank you all so much. Bottom line, you can reach me via my website, jl3motivation.com. My email is also in the chat, jlewis3@jlewis3motivation.com. And my handle is jlewismotivation, and that's at Gmail or TikTok or Instagram. So I'm all over the place. I also have a podcast. My podcast is called Giving Grief the Finger, and it's simply because it's an opportunity to let people know that you can use the energy of grief to your advantage. And once you use that energy of grief to your advantage, you can do some amazing things. And when you do those things, you are actually, like I said, give a grief the finger at that point. So that's my whole thing.
All right. And as always, man, whenever we do these panel discussions, we always come out with different perspectives. Bringing so much to the table, openness to be vulnerable, to be able to share our experiences, to be able to give to someone else to help those that are in need, and aid them in their path of healing, just with the different perspectives that we do bring to the table, which is, largely why I enjoy doing these panel discussions, right? Because as I always told you, and those that know me, it's never about me. It's about the people who are tuning in. It's about the people who are sharing, the things that we have experienced, right? It's bigger than just the conversation. It's what's being shared. And these panels are not possible without you guys. And so for me, from the bottom of my heart, man, I appreciate each and every last one of you of coming up here and just having fun, having this conversation, being, and not being afraid to share your perspective on things, So thank you each and every last one of you from the bottom of my heart. For you guys who are tuning in, I am Tony Lynch. I'm your host of the Grief Let's Talk About It podcast. So if you guys have tuned in to this point, make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification. Make sure you guys are leaving a comment, share, get in contact with these wonderful panelists. And if you are a grief worker, you're looking for a place to be supported and be a part of all the things that we got going on, find us on Facebook, the Global Grief Network. We are on LinkedIn, the Global Grief Network. And if you want to get in contact with me and tune in on some of the support groups that I got going on in my other nonprofit, Members of Us, we are a men's grief support, and we are dedicated to helping those men find a place to be vulnerable, to talk, to start healing, be better for themselves and for their families. Because the way that we always look at it is that when we begin to heal, our communities and our kids begin to. So with that being said, thank you guys for tuning in. I love you guys. And as Dee said earlier, if you guys are struggling with thoughts of suicide, there's a number 988. Do not go through this alone. Please do not go through this alone. If you guys are struggling with addiction, get into a place to where you feel comfortable and get the support and the help that you need. We have too many things going on out here for you to try to walk through this alone. We want to support you. We want you to be supported. We love you guys, and we want you guys to see tomorrow, because just like everything else, you guys matter. You guys matter. So with that being said, thank you for tuning in. Until next time, keep your head up and keep pushing forward. This is just the beginning.